Welcome everyone to this Force Friday. We are going to cover the importance of seeing today, the first step to drawing, right? And then we're going to do this as a little series, I think, over the next few weeks. So this will be a sort of overarching topic today, this first step. We're going to give you some tools today on how to see, hopefully more clearly than you see currently. And why is this important, right? Why is it important in the first place? And then I have a student example from somebody I mentor that I'm going to share with you also, discussing how that artist was able to get so much information out of just purely looking, okay? So I have to say my old joke for this for many, many years has been with new students is the only difference between you and I is that I'm just telling more of the truth right now. You're a bunch of liars and I'm the guy who's honest in the room. And I'm trying to teach you to be more honest. Not like you're doing it on purpose to lie, of course, but that's what's happening, right? Your brain doesn't accept what your eyes actually see. I was joking with a student earlier today about my wife and I are like opposites in many ways. And just one simple way is that when I put something in my house, I give it a home in my home. It has a place in the house and I know that it goes there. So if it moves, right, if it moves from there, then to me, it's gone, right? Like I've lost it. Let me get to gallery here, right? So then I've lost it. Where for her, it's okay. She knows like the general vicinity of where something is. So she'll move it around. For instance, right, if I put the milk in the fridge in the door, then I expect to go to the refrigerator, look for the milk. If it's not in the door, we don't have milk, right? And for her, she might put it somewhere else in the refrigerator, right? So it's kind of a blindness, right? A blindness. I'm causing my own blindness because my brain is not open to the idea of looking at the entire refrigerator, right? That I'm looking at, I'm looking at the place that I think it's supposed to be. So I cause my own blindness. It's very much a mental idea. You can block, yourself. So, be aware of that. Your brain's assumptions treat how well you see or don't see, and there's lots of ways around that. And internal dialogue is a big one, right? Like, what are you asking yourself? When I look at the fridge, I'm like, why isn't the milk there? Right? It's not in the door, so we must be out of it. Instead of, the milk's not there. Where is the milk? Maybe it's somewhere else in the fridge, right? Just by asking that, that's going to open up my mind to going into search mode, which I'm not normally in, right? So my point to all of this is, like I said, the joke is about lying, which kind of led me to this, right? Which is from the movie A Few Good Men, which is, you can't handle the truth, right? Like we want to allow our brains to handle the truth, right? To actually see the truth. Our brains also, by the way, they don't want, our brain doesn't want overwhelm. It wants simplicity and clarity and focus, so the drawing the human body there's a lot, it's easy to be overwhelmed by looking at the human body. And we're trying to teach you like levels of focus, like what to look at now, what to look at next, what to look at next. And then over time, as you build upon those things, you'll get acclimated to the idea of being able to see all those things at one time, right? So that's my long intro. Let's say hello to our other Force instructors. How you doing, Mrityunjay?
I'm doing good, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. And Mr. Swenley, how goes it?
Yeah, awesome. Always exciting, these sessions, So I'm looking forward to this one. No pun intended.
What a funny guy. Looking forward. So let's get to it, right? So what I put together, actually, I want to go here first. I put together this chart. I started, Swami Mrityunjay and I were thinking about this Force Friday this past Wednesday. And we had this chart, and it's like sight and understanding over time, right? So let me make sense of the chart for you. On the left-hand side is a percentage from 0 to 100, and it's about sight and understanding. I'm kind of putting these two things together. They are so integrated. It's almost like, you know, the chicken and the egg, right? But I want to leverage. I'm going to leverage a little bit here and say I'm going to put a little bit more of my bet on seeing. Okay. I think that if you can see, then you can start to figure things out. And that's where having a mentor or a teacher helps, because they can explain maybe a little more quickly to you what you're looking at, right? If you can see clearly, they can explain that to you. And then through the explanation, you start to see better, right? And all of a sudden you get this bunny hop effect of like one thing over another, and you start to learn more quickly. And then you start to ramp up through these verticals, right? So you might come in with some level of understanding. Everyone starts differently here, especially with force. I have students that come in and man, they're almost like have almost full understanding of force. Then I have students who come in at zero understanding of force, right? Each one of these, let's say force is 25% of full understanding and sight, right? Like seeing. It's 25%. You'll see what I did is there's 4 subjects here. Force, there's 4 subjects: force, form, shape, and anatomy. So that equals 100%, 25% per subject. And as you go through each one of these, you ramp up, right? You ramp up, it gets more vertical, and you get to some place, hopefully 100% of force would be 25% of full sight and understanding. So you're being taught by one of us, you're in here and you are like, I understand force, right? And hopefully it's somewhere near 100%. So if I were to mark up this, let's say this, right? So this is 100% of force, right? And then you move on. So you carry force with you, but now you're onto form. So you kind of dip a little down in understanding form because it's challenging, right? And maybe you even lose some force because of that. And that is very normal. That does happen. And then all of a sudden something happens. You get back to combining these two and you start really understanding form and perspective and structure, surface line and so on. And then you get here. And then all of a sudden you get into shape. And all of a sudden your form understanding, maybe some of force disappears, right? And you hit your new low over here, which by the way, you'll notice is higher than anything else happened prior, right? But then you start ramping up and you go, okay, I'm starting to understand, right? You start surpassing yourself here and you start understanding how shape combines all this. And then the same thing happens with anatomy. So after you get through all of this, you get this understanding of, and sight, right? I see more force, I see more form, I see more shape and anatomy. And not only do I see it, but I actually understand what I'm seeing. If we stuck only on the sight end, I think the purest form of sight is copy, right? It's like, I can look, I can copy. I can look, I can copy, right? That's probably the sight at its purest. What I'm trying to have you do, or we're all trying to have you do, is not only see, but understand what you're looking at, which is a massive difference, right? Huge difference to understand what you're seeing, right? So again, that's what we want to work with. I want to work with that space today. We're going to teach you techniques, like I said, on seeing better. Any questions in the chat yet? I haven't checked out you guys out there. Any thoughts on acronyms to help with the presence and workflow? I've heard Jeff Watts use SIPTA, scan, scan, identify, predict, decide, execute. Scan, so scan is seeing, right? Identify is really an understanding. Predict, I guess that I'd have to really sit and think about this. Scan, identify, I don't know if predict would come. I guess predict would come after. Yeah, so you can scan something, identify what it is, kind of predict what it would do. The problem with the word predict for me is predict is like assume, right? So you can assume. I'd almost want to get rid of the predict. I would say scan, identify, decide, and execute. Yeah, that sounds better to me. I would get rid of predict and I would put in decide and execute, right? So you want to see, scan is seeing, identifying is, do you understand what you're looking at? Decide how you're going to handle it, what you're going to draw of it, right? And then go draw it, right? I think I think it's pretty damn close. I'm just a little leery about the word predict in there because there's a lot of assumption, you can scan and identify and then all of a sudden make an assumption and take yourself right out of the scanning and identifying and then go do the wrong thing. And that happens, I've done that myself. Okay, I don't have an acronym off the top of my head though. To me, it's not an acronym, it's the formula. So if you haven't looked at our older videos on the website, to me, it's more of usually the eyeball, the brain. It's a lopsided brain. The brain, which I know looks like a butt, and then a hand, right? So here's like a cartoony hand equals drawing. And I think even more, like this is like a very simple formula. I think what happens is a little more complicated than this. You probably look, you try to understand what's going on. You probably look again to make sure and see if your understanding helps you see better. Then that brings you more information, and then maybe you go over here. So I'd probably say it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Something like that. I think that's a little bit more specific as to what's happening, right? It's like seeing, understanding, right? Which is scanning and like interpreting, right? Looking again, I would like double scan to check, go, okay, yeah, my brain is right. I think this is what is like going on over there, right? And then I would come back and, learn from that experience and then go draw it, right? Okay, any other questions? See, last stream was awesome. Made a gesture fun instead of frustrating after a year of doing them. That's cool. Thank you. I'm glad that gesture is becoming more fun. Gesture should be fun. Yeah. Make it fun. Hope to see more of these and have fun live drawing is what I asked. Thanks. Good morning from Hawaii. Sometimes I do draw along with everyone drawing. Can't cover up so much information. You can always draw along if you want. Who's stopping you? Exactly. Yeah, if we bring up photographs and draw, always feel free to draw along with us. I think that's one of the best ways for you guys to learn. Welcome everyone today. In other words, why don't Mr. M and Co make the above happen so all of us can have fun and see feedback as it happens? In the balance of fairness, why can't some of us draw along in the Zoom? Well, that's a good question, actually. So Roger's asking, we were just talking about that before we started actually today. So we might try to we did this a little bit in the past, maybe 1 or 2 videos of trying to bring in like a student, the software where we can do that. So we might do that. We might even hold workshops where you guys draw and we bring your drawings in. And then what we do every so often, every few months is look at artists' work and do critiques, right? So Roger, if you have any other thoughts around that, I'd love to hear them. But yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see if we can get more collaboration going on. Okay, so where are we at, right? So we have this idea, the eyeball, brain, and hand. We have the chart. It seems like there's no questions on the chart, right? Does everyone feel like they understand this? On the bottom, notice is time, right? That's the other axis, the one that none of us can forget. It takes time to go through all of this. And by the way, talking about time, some students will get through force in this amount of time. Some students will get through force in this amount of time, right? Like really long. Some students might get here. Some students will get through force really fast. Let's say I have a student that gets through force in this amount of time, and then form all of a sudden is like off the chart. It's like over here somewhere. That happens a lot, actually, right? So this is a very pliable chart. It's just a very simple overview from a teacher's standpoint. I want you to see how we see this and what we look at. And I'm aware of this when I'm teaching, when we're mentoring, like, okay, or even the premium members, like it's taking them this long to get through here. Some students get through in 3 months and form, some take 6 or 9 months, right? And are they cresting, are they pushing up? I kind of have control over this moment. And that moment is in premium and mentoring and Swenley and Matunje have this, as a teacher, the right to say when the change happens or when the gate opens, right, to move to the next thing. It's like, enough about force. Maybe we get to 100%, but maybe we got to 90%. I think you can manage getting through here, and we'll keep working on this and carrying it forward and keep learning it as we combine it with form, for instance, right? And I think that's one of the benefits we give you guys is to know, when do I go through this gate, right? When do I go through this gate, right? Is knowing that. So, all right, if there's no questions, then I'm gonna move forward. Have I ever met, no, I've never met Jeff or Bustos. I know I think I may have met Bustos when I had my school, but I'm not sure. I met a couple of sculpting instructors when I was hiring, and I don't recall if he was one of them or not. But I know he's very good at like crochet, right? I've experimented in character design, find 4 strong, so useful dynamic poses. That's great, Alan. All right, let's move on. So how do we do this, right? So the acronym that I came up with for this part of it is LALA, right? Which stands for length, apex, location, and angle. So I want to show you how that works very briefly here. How does this break down? So when you start with force and you're learning how to draw with force, it's easily out of control, right? You have the whiteness of the page and you're drawing these curves. And it's like, what is that? Right? And they're hard to, they could be hard to control. You know, it's like we're asking you to draw curves. It's very fluid. It's very spaghetti-like. I use spaghetti as a metaphor a lot at this time in learning how to draw with force. I want to be aware of LALA when I'm doing this, right? So what does that mean? I want to be aware of length. There's lots of different lengths, by the way. I would say length number 1 is the length of the line, right? Then there's also the length of like the length from one end of the line to where that apex is. This is a length, right? Kind of starts tying into this. It's like, where does the apex then finally land? But there's a distance here. There's a distance here, you see? Right, so I'm like, where does that apex land? Length is very important. Length is basically measure, right? It's a measurement, right? Apex, it's a measurement, right? So if this was a straight line, and I'm going to talk about straight lines and angles in a moment, but if this was a straight line, here, if I draw a straight line, and I want to turn it into a curve, one of the first things of importance is what is that line's length, right? So number 1 is length. And number 2 is where's the apex? Now, not to get too mathematical about all this, but let's say the apex is down here, measurement-wise. What also matters is how far out is the curve from that straight line? Is it here? Is it here? Right? Is it here? It's like, does this curve go like this? Does this curve go like this? Does this curve go like this? You see? And the more curved it is, of course, the more applied forces in that curve. But I'm aware of the length. So there's 2 main things here, right? The length and the apex, that location of that apex, you see? Okay. Now, not only the location of the apex and the length, but also there's also a length that goes from here to here, which is if I start here, what is the length from one apex to the next apex, right? Those are 2 applied forces. I want to get a sense of that. And that leads us into angle, right? So it's like, this is location because I have to travel. So it's like, where's the second point? This gives me a location. Remember, you're just in the white of the page and you're just trying to understand, like, where am I putting a pin in my drawing, right? Here's the push pin, right? So I have a pin here and I have a pin here. How do they relate to one another? All right, it's like saying this and this. Can you get this and this right? Right? And to see those 2 moments as the 2 apexes and how those curves relate to one another. So in between those 2 curves, you know, I always see almost the beginnings of like an abstract shape. So I see this going on in here, right? You see that? I see that. That gives me location, right? It gives me angle. It gives me length, right? And it's built usually off of also where the apexes of both of those curves are, you see? So there's a lot of stuff going on in the brain machine, you know, while trying to draw with force, right? Any questions, right? Great chart, makes sense. La, la, la. Okay, it seems like we're all good. So this is a lot, like I said, there's a lot of sort of geometry going on in the background to draw and to try and be accurate. You know, and there's different, you know, this causes all kinds of different forces, right? So if I have this force and I see this shape, right? So I start seeing this, like that is one that creates this kind of angle, by the way, right? Like so. versus one that does this, and then that's like over here, right? And if I fill this in, right, look at the angle this makes, right? So much more dramatic an angle. Here, I'll do one more just to make this very obvious. So notice this one. You see how vertical, I went from most vertical over here, number one. Here's number one, number two, and number three, right? So one is the most vertical, number two starting angle, number three is almost 45 degrees, right? So I'm paying attention to that based on where these curves are, how they're connected by their apexes. And when I'm on the line itself, again, I'm aware of its length, I'm aware of its apex, right? And that apex is not only where is it within the distance of the length of the line, but how far away is it from that straight line, okay? Now, one last thing. If we started drawings with angles, right? Because angles actually, I think angles are a little easier to see than curves, because a curve is basically born out of a straight line and you're doing more things to it, as you just saw, right? So it's a little more sophisticated. But if the problem is we start with angles, which I've done before, I've actually taught that as well. The challenge you run into is trying to build off of that, right? So if I did something like this, for instance, let's just say I did this, right? The challenge with this is human nature, quite honestly, which is if I draw that first, then that's what my brain sees and accepts. And it's challenging. It makes it more difficult to come from this and now say, I'm going to add force to it. I'm going to push beyond this and make this a forceful drawing. So the first challenge is seeing past the angles, right? Just these lines. Number two, I'd say with this method is that there's no force. And what does that mean? That's very easy thing for me to write. It means there's no function, right? Like we're not even thinking about function, right? There's no conversation here about how things work. There's also no experience of force, right? You're not feeling it at all. Now, by the way, just to show how much I do respect the idea of angles, you know, on drawingforce.com, we do have a first step, which is to draw like almost like a flower sack figure and draw angled arms and legs, right? So it's something like this. So we do that, but then we go and we draw forceful drawings. So in my respect to angles, we put this as a separate like step. And then we say, let's draw now with force, right? This is done so you can see all those angles because I do respect that idea. But I think it's really tough to take that drawing and then work on top of it and keep pushing it. I tried to make this so detached in a way. So it's informative, but detached from your experience, right? So then you can look at that and just go, okay, I know I got to get these angles right. Here's how the feet are. Now let me go draw with force, you see? But if you do that and you keep trying to work on it, I think that's really hard. You know what? I just moved in this house I'm in. It was being built when I first saw it. So it was just 2x4s and a roof, right? And there were other people that saw the house, but I think most people would probably have a tough time seeing past 2x4s and a ceiling, right? To understand what the volume of the house is going to actually feel like, right? It's kind of the same thing, right? Once you have this angle drawing, I think it's tough to say, I'm going to make this a force drawing, right? I'm going to get force into this because you already have something that's just angled out. So be careful, you know, be aware of that. I think the angles are really important. I think especially in arms and legs, you know, if you have a torso and it's got force in it, right? You're moving all this stuff around. And you know that let's say the arms are like this. Force is not far away from this, you know, because arms are relatively thin, right? You just got to push the arc into this. So I just don't think it's asking a lot to make the leap from the angle to the force line. Because as soon as you put a little bit of a curve, you're having to decide on a direction, not a straight direction, but an arc of a direction, and arcs lead us more clearly with energy. As soon as you take a straight line, you put some bend in it, man, you have way more power going on, right? Okay, so last but not least, I have a photograph. I thought I would kind of go through some of this with you.
There's a question, Mike.
Yeah,
By Don.
please.
Yeah, he says, it seems like lately I've been drawing legs too short. Does that order that we draw the body parts help to figure out the length of the curves better?
Does the order that we draw the body parts help? So the way we normally do it on, drawingforce.com is to say, I've got the torso down first, right? I think it does, because if you do make this number 1, then proportionately, you can look at this, right? And say, here's a distance that I have. How long is the leg, right? Like I look at this, how long is the leg supposed to be? Now, you can look at 10 different anatomy books and how to draw books. You're going to get 10 different answers. Some people measure from the bottom of the pelvis, or from the top of the pelvis. It's usually almost about, the length of the leg is typically around the same length as the torso, basically. And usually the top half of the leg is about the same as the bottom half of the leg. Is that for everybody? No. And is every model? No. Right? But it gives you some general understanding. I have students that draw legs too short, students that draw legs too long. And I think as we go through the different steps of, again, LALA and seeing force versus seeing form and shape and anatomy, over those time periods, you learn all the tools it takes to actually see honestly, right? To handle the truth, as Jack Nicholson says. So if I go into this, right, like this interesting pose, it's got a lot of foreshortening and stuff going on, but if I just want force, right, I would say I'm going to grab the front of the rib cage here, right? Now that's already, a lot has happened right there, okay? A lot has already happened. I could have said, I just want this angle. I already have that angle in my head. I've got that angle. I know that I want this length, right? But I want it to be forceful. So I feel like her chest is bending or pushing outward, right? So I have that curve. I've got the side of her body. I can make that angle. I already know this angle. I'm going to bend. Okay, so I'm going to bend her this way, and that's going to sweep up, around the pelvis here. I can come up and draw through, right? Last week, somebody asked about body parts and such, and we got quite a few responses to my comment about you shouldn't let any part of the body block any other part. Draw through the body to, get to the information that you need, right? So here, I could do this now, and then I can get this in here, right? So the mere fact that at least I'm taking these quote unquote angles, but I'm drawing them as curves, right, is giving me more force. Now it feels more to me like I'm getting from here to here and understanding that this is what I call a C-tor. So you can see this kind of looks like the letter C, right? And it's pushing this way through the model, right? And each line was an idea. So you don't want to do this, right? Don't scratch your way fearfully around the body, right? I was like, okay, I want to understand the force of the front of the chest, and angle is part of that equation, but I'm aware of the bend that comes out of that angle, right? So if I turned again this into angles and I had this and I had this, I'm aware I want to push out. I want to push out only this much, right? And this far. I want to push out only this much and this far, you see? Here, this is a curve that pushes out pretty far, right? Right there at the edge of the pelvis, you see? So that's what I'm going through, right? I'm using LALA. I've got length, I've got apexes, I got locations. I'm aware of where this is compared to this, you see? I'm aware of that. Remember before I was toning in shapes. When I drew this, even from before I put the first line down, I also saw this. Okay, just so you know what's going on in the back of my mind. I'm aware of this. You see what I mean? I can see that, and I'm seeing that through her arm, through her head. Right? I'm not letting those things block me. They're almost other shapes on top of this shape, right? It's like, here's her head, right? It's something like that. Here's her arm, it's here, but I'm looking right past all that to get to the shape that I want, right? So, and then the same thing would happen with the legs, right? If I want length, right, it's like, where's the knee, right? The big question is where's the knee? I taught at Pixar for quite some time, and I had a student who drew really well, but he had a hard time getting past. It was like a trust issue, you know. It's like he had to put a dot down. He had to put dots down like this, and then he would go and draw the forces. But he wanted that dot, you know. He wanted the dot for the length, and I was like, look, you know how to do it. You do it every week, over and over again. Just draw the darn line, right? Like, just say, I'm going to draw a line, and I'm going to stop around there, right? I'm going to stop around here. You see, right? So just get those marks in there. Boom, boom, right? And then you start understanding, you know, the beginnings of how these forces start to, you know, how they connect to one another, right? So my point to all of this is today's focus is seeing. In seeing, there's LALA is a tool for seeing, right? It gives you a location, apex, length, and angle, right? And using all of those when you're drawing something as abstract as force is really helpful because it gives you some like geometry to grab onto, right? When I draw feet, I'm always aware of the position of like one foot to another foot. What do I get out of that? I get length and I get an angle, right? That gives me locations of the two, right? It helps me plant things down. So this level of the geometric machine, like I said, is going on in the background all the time. Using LALA will help you to have a better shape in your figure drawings, most definitely. Yeah. Using LALA not only is at the very beginning, but I think throughout just learning in general, you can use those tools all the time. Daniel says, do those angle lines have anything to do with the straights and shape? Yes, because straights are where you really can understand an angle more clearly, right? So if I had a shape, you know, I would have my curve of force, which abstractly started off like this, right? But I said, I want to push out here at the lower third, and I want to push out that far, right? And then I might have a straight line. Now, let me bring this down again, like this. And then maybe I have a straight line, and the straight line really helps me see the overarching sort of like angle and shape of angle of that shape, right? So the force of it's in there with that first line, and that first line was indicated using LALA as well, right? Here's the location, here's the apex, the distance away from the main line, right? And having that straight in there, it kind of helps, you know, it helps seeing this. But like I said, we don't get to that till later, and it's okay, you know, because at the beginning, we're trying to hold on to force. It starts with the force experience, right? Because we want to keep fluidity going in the body. It's okay if things get a little wild, you know, it's okay. It's like, it's all right if your room's a little messy. We don't want it to be so messy that we can't see the floor, right? But it's okay if it's a little messy. I know you'll get better at it. You will organize over time, you know? I'm gonna end with one last story here, which is I went for the first time to a pottery class the other weekend with my daughter. And first of all, I was really intrigued with how parallel it was to what I teach, right? And what we're teaching you guys with force. First of all, if any of you have done pottery, you know, you have this spinning wheel and you have like a gas pedal, basically. It's electric, but it's like a pedal. And at the beginning, you want to slap the clay down in the middle of the wheel, and you're not going to hit the middle. So you have to like push the clay towards the center until you get to the middle, and the wheel spins relatively fast. So it's first step, big, hierarchical, abstract, get it to the middle. Then after that, you get it to the middle, then you decide on like the height of it, depending on how much you push into it or push down into it, how high or low it is. Then you start digging a hole into it, right? So that, you know, you're starting to create like a pot, right? Which is pretty amazing. And what's happening is over time, by the time you're doing detail on the edges of it, the wheel is much slower. So it proved out like the hierarchy thing, you know, big to medium to small. You go from fast to medium, you know, to slow, right? It's like same mental process that we go through. You're going from big abstract stuff to all the details. And as the teacher said repeatedly in this class, like there's nothing to be afraid of. You know, if you mess up, just collapse the whole thing, mush the clay around, throw it back in the middle. Like, I got plenty of other clay over there in the bag. So if you screw something up, throw the throwaway over there, just go grab more, right? That's the kind of learning mindset you want to be in. I thought he did a great job. You know, I was like, okay, great. This isn't like a fear creating instructor. He's not a perfectionist, right? He really understood how to give somebody a safe space to work in, and he understood hierarchy. And I got to tell you, he demoed for my daughter and I, and when he did it, man, it looked easy. Right? As I'm sure for some of you maybe watch a straw and go, oh, it looks so easy, like why can't I do it? It's practice, right? I knew watching him, I'm like, oh man, he's been doing this for like 20, 30 years. He just, you know, he made pot go up and down and left and right, did like all those different things within seconds, right? He would destroy it, build it back up, destroy it, build it back up. It was like watching magic happen, right? And then I got there and I was like, I can't get the clay to center on the damn wheel. Like, how do I do this? And he came over and physically like helped me push my hand. And I was like, oh my God, you're using way more strength, right, than I anticipated. Like, I could see what was going on, but I couldn't feel it, right? And feeling his hand push mine, I was like, okay, damn, this is way more powerful than I thought, you know? I can't do that for you guys, unfortunately, digitally, but I tell you, when I draw class with students, I very often will grab a student's hand. I have pretty big hands. I'll put my hand over the student's hand and I will draw with their hand holding the graphite and go, look, it's like this. And they're like, oh my God, I get it. Like, I get it. You know, you just have to like get into the physical experience of things. Okay, so I'm going to end with my pottery story. We didn't decide who's going to go first. Who went first last time? Do you guys remember?
I went second, so Sunday should be going first today. Second.
All right. Yeah. You all ready, Mr. Swinley?
Yeah. You didn't show the student work? I mean.
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, before I hand it off to Swinley, I have, this is from today. So this is one of my students that I mentor. His name is Eric. I brought this in because I knew today what we were going to teach for Force Friday. Eric has been through force and form and shape with me. This was a very long drawing. There were numerous other processes and layers that you can see here. I think he said he put 5 or 6 hours into this drawing to get to, not like it's all in here, like there's other drawings prior to get to here, right? What impressed me about this, based on our topic today, is this. I have not gone over back anatomy with Eric at all yet. He hasn't gone into anatomy, he hasn't studied anatomy. All he did was look, right? And that's one of the thing I'm focusing on with Eric right now is how clearly can you see, which is what we're talking about. And I was just so darn impressed with how far his eye got him, right? He drew the deltoid here. He got the edge of the scapula here at the top and the edge of the left side of it, the shape of it. You know, if you look closely, you could see that. You could see that in the photograph, right? But I got to tell you, right, many people would miss this amount of information and be able to describe it so clearly. Would it help him to know what's there? Yes, because he'd get even more detail, more understanding, right, of seeing, and his seeing would get even better. But darn, your eye can take you really far if you just allow yourself to accept what you are looking at, right? So stop lying, right? Handle the truth, see clearly. And with us, the first step to seeing is, do you see force? Can you find these moments of energy moving from one area to the body to the other? And it's okay if the proportion stuff's a little off. You use LALA to kind of gradually push the clay in, right? And get the stuff massaged to the right place. And that's why we use something called soft touch, right? You keep pushing it in. That's basically what I was doing with the clay, right? Except that was too soft. I need to come in a little firmer. All right, so with that, thank you for the reminder. I'm gonna hand this off to Swinley. All right, well, I have the Eye of Sauron here behind me. Burning into the back of my head.
You have to give me sharing power.
Oh, power, this whole power thing. Make co-host. There you go.
Let's see, all right. All right, you guys can see my screen with the reference?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I have to get rid of our heads from the interface. I think you should do. All right, so let's see, and bringing together all the wonderful things that Mike explained, you know, and as a teacher, it's interesting. I've been just reflecting this week in the job of a teacher, you know, and breaking things down, because as an artist, a lot of things become second nature with practice, but in teaching, you have to really think about what you're thinking about, and that's a skill all by itself. So let's see, when I look at the photo, the first thing I see is the story, like what's she doing? What's the action? And she's like ducking and throwing this uppercut. And so I want to use all the things that Mike talked about to draw the action, so my goal is to draw angles and proportions and such. Those are secondary, and the primary goal is the action. So let's see. So she's throwing a punch. So the first thing I see in terms of angles, even before I start drawing, I see the angle of her torso. It's very diagonal. It's very common for students to have a drawing like this, and then they come in and you will see them draw a torso that is like this, and taking out all the drama out of the image. And also, like Mike mentioned before, you want to see truthfully, so I see this force here, this curve at top of the torso, and I'm looking at, and this is like a falling down experience, so the feeling, the experience is very important. It's one thing to see someone put the lines on the page, but it's another thing to go through the experience. You want to experience all the energy and drama of the pose. So I see this is hanging, and this is connecting me to the pelvis around the rear end, and here the gluteus is connecting us to this leg, and as I'm drawing this, I'm empathizing with the model, and I'm imagining if I was leaning my torso forward like this, there would be a lot of weight and tension on the leg, and then you can see it. Look at how tense her muscles are, So again, look at the concept of length being applied here. As I'm like, the first thing I put down is the torso, right? I have this S curve going on here. So I was looking at this shape as a whole, and I know that proportionally the rib cage is about half the torso length, and that the first half of that S curve is created by the rib cage, and the other half is the abdomen and the pelvis. So that all comes down with understanding and observation. So I have this length here of the torso, and then the torso, like Don was asking before about the body parts, the torso becomes my reference point for the rest of the body parts, and actually the first line I put down, that decides the scale of the drawing, because I could have started at the top of the torso like this, which means that relative to this line, the torso would have been much bigger. So the first line you put down is kind of like, it's important because it decides, it's kind of like your reference point for the rest. So we go from here to here, and normally I like to see through and complete the torso shape. So I have like this solid mass to work with. So I can see here, as I'm looking more and more at that leg, I see that it's a bit more diagonal. Like I pushed it more towards horizontal, but it's a bit more like this. So notice that my line is like the dots example that Mike mentioned before. Like I'm visualizing those dots in a sense because I'm aware of the distance. I'm looking at the torso and what's the distance from this point to the knee, and then what's the distance from the knee to the ankle. So I'm using all these things to draw the action. So this is driving us in front of the calf and connecting us to the heel. I see the angle of the foot, and it's firmly planted on the ground, because again, all the weight is on that foot. Right, so we have the first leg. Let's go to the second one. So again, I'm thinking through about how the leg attaches to the pelvis, you know, and I'm looking at this distance. So a lot is happening as I'm drawing, which someone who's just looking at it won't be aware of at first glance. Now, same here, so as I'm drawing this, I'm looking at this negative shape and where does the ankle land? Now this shows me I need to go a bit farther. Ankle is around here, and I see the foot, and notice the angle that's occurring here. Now, so I'm using that to help me place the forces. Now that I have these down, I can look at the angle between the feet, and I see that this is, I'm a little off here. This leg needs to be slightly longer, so the heel lands around here. Now, so you do your best, you take your best shot, and then you observe and you correct. You know, you don't have to pressure yourself to get everything right at one shot. Okay, so we have the torso, we have the legs, so we've established the balance. Now, so now I want to add the arms, and I can see force-wise, I see the relationship between the front of the torso all the way into this arm. Like this is one big idea in a sense. You know, I can drive force from here all the way around. I look at this distance again, like how long is the arm, where's the elbow? This is coming towards us slightly. Now here's the wrist. And then you have like the boxing glove here. So I'm just drawing the forces now. Now that I have this big arc, I can add the smaller arc of the deltoid on top of it. And again, as I'm drawing that curve, you know, visually it has a certain length. So I'm aware of that, you know, and now that I have this, I can compare this distance, you know, from the end of the deltoid to the elbow to help me get a bit more accurate. Now this also shows me that I need a bit more volume here at the torso. Also, you keep working the drawing, you know, kind of like the clay example that Mike gave. You know, you don't start with the final product. Keep massaging the clay until it looks like what you want it to look like. Right, so I can see you can connect from this edge of the torso or of the rib cage into the deltoid. I see this rhythm. You know, arm is going up like that, and I'm looking at the angle of this arm. And when I look at angles, I always compare them to a horizontal or a vertical, you know. So in my mind, this is going on. I'm looking at what's the angle, how much does it deviate from a perfectly horizontal or vertical line. And so this is bringing us all the way up now into that other boxing glove. Now, so I'm imagining these speed lines now to show the power. And lastly, let's add a natural center in here. Now I can see the center line going from top to bottom. And this helps you to place the pit of the neck, because there's where the neck muscles attach, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Now see this, the neck is, the head and neck are pushing out this way and up. It's going like that. And I can see the jaw. So I'm just looking at the shape now, you know, to help me with the placement. I'm looking at the angle of her head. Now it's going back here all the way into the cranium like this. And I can use wrapping to get me a bit of volume here. Now just to get me started. And now that I've put this down, I can see that the shoulder is a bit off, like there is this little space between the shoulder and the neck. So this needs to move around just a little bit. Yeah, and we have the forces, and we can, like the clothing. Today's student was saying that the clothing is kind of like cheating because it's very easy to see the form. You know, just you have to draw the wrapping. I can use her top here, for example, and I can see exactly what the angle of that form is in 3D space. All right, so this would be the first pass. You know, like this is the blueprint of understanding how this body is functioning to perform the action. You know, the next step would be to use that blueprint to add form. You know, we want like forceful form, like this coming slightly towards us. We can use wrapping. Again, like start adding these forceful volumes. You know, so we don't want the volumes to be stiff and lose all the work that we did in the previous step. You know, and you continue working on the drawing and continue refining. All right, I'm going to stop to give Mitunjay enough time to draw. Were there any questions, Mike?
Not specifically what you're doing. That was good. I'm just trying to field some other stuff right now.
Okay, let me stop the share.
All right. Thank you, Swenley.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, awesome drawing.
So let's see the LALA in action now. So here's my model, right? And I'm not gonna just like do the demo because when we covered that for you, I'm just gonna play off, you know, with the length, apex, location, and the angle, right? So let's say, you know, what comes up. You're just gonna play with the with the principles here, and let's see what comes up. Okay. So the general idea of this model is this. Okay, I'm just giving you a heads up right now. It's like this and like going down to here. Okay, that's the general idea. Now let's start playing with the length of these forces, right? So it's kind of amazing that when you just draw a line, like a single force line, it gives you all those four principles, right? It's just, it gives you length, first of all, right? It gives you length like that. So if we increase the length of this idea of the chest region, you know, too long, right? Let's say I do this. And so what it's going to tell me? It's going to tell me that either my figure drawing is going to be too large, right? And the pelvis force is going to be this big, at least this big, right? So as you can see now my torso is like becoming more bigger and bigger. You know, as I'm like increasing the length, my drawing is becoming more bigger and bigger. But if I just increase the length of the chest region, the chest force, and keep the pelvis same, like smaller, you know, see, look what started to happen. Now, I would say, oh, my proportions is gonna be this big, you know, the torso would be that big, this big, and the pelvis region, you know, would be super small, you know, just like that. I use that, you know, as we are discussing, we can use these, we use that, you know, we use LALA as a point of measurement, right? And also to check whether, you know, things are going at the right places or not. But we can also use these principles to exaggerate things, right? And that's what the character design book, you know, you can check the character design, force character design book in there as well. So we can try to exaggerate, right, these proportions, you know, once we know how to like figure these out. So that's the length, right? We can still play off with that. I can say, let me take another layer. So let's say the length of the chest force, right? It's gonna be small, and the pelvis is gonna be large, right? I know, way off the proportion of the reference here, but see that's where we want to play off, right? So I would suggest like play off with these principles and play off with these thoughts, and then you'll understand like how basically it affects the model, right? So that's the length, you know. Again, there are so many types of length that you can play with, right? This is the length of one of the forces, right? This is the length of another force. There's a length of this whole idea, basically, as you can say, right? This is the length of the whole idea. So you can do this, basically like this. You can do something like that, right? That's another way too much long angle, length, right? So that's length, okay? Now we're gonna play with the apex. So I usually I would like to start with the leg. That's how I can best define the apex here. So when we are making like general leg, without worrying about the apex, this is basically called the levels of line, by the way. So there are like 3 levels of force line. So the first level of force line is basically when you are not worrying about the apex when you're making like generic curves, okay? So the apex is always in the center. But when you start to shift the apex, it becomes a second level of line. So I can say, okay, the apex of the upper, the thighs, basically, it resides here. If you see the real leg, you'll see that the muscles, that's how the shape of the muscles is. The apex is much lower, on the upper thighs. I mean on the thighs, right? So that's how you define an apex. So now we can start to play off with this figure here as well, and see how the effect works. So as you can see here, the rib cage is kind of poking out, if I zoom it, see there? The rib cage is poking out there. So if I draw a curve, right? A curve in there, I would say my apex is right here, where again, the most amount of applied force is being like attached to, right? It's working there. So I would say my apex is right here, okay? And with the pelvis, as you can see, it's right there, it's up there. So it's mostly like that, see that apex in there. So that makes up the relationship, the rhythm. Now I can play off of that and say, oh, is my apex is right here? And see, I shifted it to way like upper side instead of lower. And I can say, oh, no, the apex is not up here, but it's lower here, just like that. And see how much it affects, the function of the body. If I just pulled off the old one here, see, right there. See, now if I just make the shapes out of this, see, that's the shape I was looking for in the beginning. And here, see, that's the shape, as you can see, it almost like becomes like a tube, it becomes like that. So apexes, I think apexes and the angle are the most important, I don't know, all 4 of them are important, but I think like the apexes and the angles, which are the most important, right? So apexes, very, very important, okay? Another one is location, right? So location, yeah, just as I said, when you're on that point, you feel that, no, that's the most important, right? So location is also very, very important. So if I do this, right? If I do that, and if I make the pelvis like way off, right? Just above here. So look at how much area I'm covering. Basically, this is all the area that I'm covering, right? Location. You can play off the location by sides. You can play off the location on a vertical line, right? You can play off the locations on a diagonal. So you can something like that. Location could be like this, and see, like I'm just making it more and more vertical, just like that. So that's the location of the curves. Okay, you can do something like that, right? So as you can see, way off. That's the location. And the last one is the angle, again, very, very important. So yeah, again, that's what Swanley mentioned is like, I see most of the students, they just underplay the angle of the torso, like too much, so instead of doing this, I see that angle in the beginning, I see this, I see like, oh, this is my angle, and then I draw like forces around it. Okay, it's not necessary that I draw this every time, but yeah, I mean, just I see that in my mind's eye, right? Where this is where the gravity guide comes in, because we teach angles in it. That's the goal for it, by the way. The gravity guide exists, to make you aware of the angles. Okay, so this is the thing that you look for. and then you draw like the curves like around that angle, so it gives you like more of a dynamic feel on the function of the body. So people do it like this, people just underplay it so much and they just do it like that, so be aware of the angles, right? Again, this is one of the angles that you can look for. You can look for the angles on both of the apexes. So let's say this is the apex, this is the apex. So that's another angle. It depends, it depends like if your work is done by looking at the generic angle of the torso, then, why not just do it? If not, then you just have to look at the angle of both the apexes of the direction forces. So that's one, that's second direction force. Yeah, let's see what else we can play with angles, so this and again, if I just want to play with angles, I just have to play with some other principle, which is, let's say, location, right? So I can do the location here. I can draw one curve here. So I'm not just playing with the angles, I'm also playing with the location here. Okay. So that's about the torso, mostly about the torso, because we always want to move with hierarchy, right? So once you get that, with the limbs, it's much more easier than the torso itself, right? Because they're just mostly like generic curves, right? So let's say if I get the torso right, just like here, let's say this is my torso here, right there. Then I just have to make the curves, just like that, this and this and this. So this is much more easier, than figuring out the torso. So through hierarchical standpoint, you just want to do the fix the torso and everything. You want to like measure all those, and then you want to move on basically from that point in measuring all the other things as well. So you can go with, oh, see the angle here, look at the angle of the upper arm, look at the angle of the lower arm. See, obviously we have figured out the angle of the torso here, look at this angle, the upper leg, thighs, the calf, right? Look at the angle of this, so that's you want to focus on, and then you can, yeah, basically like design forces around it. Okay, so hope you enjoyed, and yeah, we are just way over time a little bit, so I'm gonna hand it over to Mike to conclude the stream. Okay, hope you enjoyed.
Thanks, Mattesi.
Yeah, welcome.
So that's it, guys. I hope that you guys learned today how to use LALA, the importance of the geometry that you need to see, how important seeing is, right? Seeing is the first step in the formula to drawing, right? You got to be able to see, right? So if you're having a hard time with that, I've even had students start with just simple still lifes just to get them to see shapes before even doing force at times, right? Like whatever it takes, but you got to learn to see. And typically the challenge to seeing is allowing your brain to step in and not handle the truth, right? Allowing the lie to occur. So you got to get past that first hurdle and really look. By the way, one last bit of advice, I guess, for the seeing part is if I had a friend of mine, and I've had this happen, by the way, just friends of mine say, hey, do you think you can teach anybody to learn? And do you think you can teach me to learn to draw? Because I just draw stick figures. The first thing I tell them is I would literally just set up a still life on the table and say, okay, go draw that still life without looking at the piece of paper. And that, if they're truthful about doing that, then they'll actually, for the first time, really start like looking, right? Really looking and moving their hand around to it. It's not so much like the drawing is going to exactly match, right? Because they're not looking at the drawing, but you can see in the drawing and interpret if they were honest about what they were looking at or if they're making things up. I've had students draw blindly, meaning looking at their subject, not the paper, and still draw what's going on in their head, not what their eyes are looking at, right? So I just want to make clear to you how powerful it is, your brain, to lying, right? To stopping you from seeing the truth, right? So the first thing you got to do is to get out of your own way, right? Let your brain get out of the way. You want to have an open conduit of looking, right? Looking and observing and believing in what you see and getting your hand to move around with that sense of sight. that gets you to good copying, right? Really good copying. You can look at something and copy it and nail it down, and it looks exactly like what the thing looks like, right? You get your drawing there. Now, what we're providing on top of that is to understand what you are seeing, right? That you actually get it. You see force in it, you see form in it, you see shape and design and anatomy and so on, right? And obviously we teach you all the other stuff like hierarchical thinking, iteration, soft touch, and all the bigger umbrellas that go over top of all this skill stuff, right? So have a great weekend, everyone. Have a safe and enjoyable week as well. We'll see you next Friday with another subject. We'll probably continue this and talk next week about form and seeing form, right? Today was like a general overview of seeing, and I think we're going to go through each one of the other phases with specificity and try to help you guys see the things that we see. All right, that's it. Thanks again, Mrityunjay and Swenley. I'll see everyone next Friday. Take care.